watched the movie Excalibur last night, which is an excellent film, and I'm very, very glad I watched it. It's essentially the complete Arthurian legend from Arthur's birth, before Arthur's birth, to his death. And you're not just getting Arthur's life, you get what led up to it. You get his ascension into kinghood. You get his mistakes and the consequences it has on the people he rules over. You get his love life. You get his relationship with Guinevere. You get his relationship with the wizard Merlin. And it's all done very, very well. Now, it feels more like watching a play than watching a movie. The acting is very much like a stage play. It's stage acting, it's not movie acting, so there's a bit of cheesiness to it, but in a very enjoyable, entertaining way. It feels like some of the biblical epics of the early 20th century. Now, the person I saw it with has seen it significantly more often than I have. And so I actually had some trouble following it because it's not a linear story. It's not just focusing on King Arthur. Sometimes you get Merlin as the focus. Sometimes you get the other Knights of the Round Table in the focus. Sometimes it focuses on Lancelot. There's parts that focus on Morgana. There's parts that focus on Percival. I think they are all very, very interesting, and they are all played by big, dramatic actors before they got famous. You got Helen Mirren, you got Liam Neeson, you got Patrick Stewart, and everything they say has a huge weight to it. It feels like a movie that a lot of things were inspired by and influenced by. Interestingly enough, I'm very surprised that I don't hear this movie talked about that much, because it is so profound. It is Shakespearean, it's biblical, it's historical. The person I saw it with said to me, it's about the introduction of Christianity into a formerly pagan world. Now, I wasn't raised Christian, so that's a little harder for me to pick up on, even though I have some familiarity with the New Testament. So this was very much a learning experience for me too. Now, and I had some knowledge about the Arthurian legend too. I was raised with it, so I knew the major plot points, but this really gives you in great detail the story. And another thing the person I saw it with said to me was, you see how corruption starts, because a lot of it comes down to human vice. Now, Arthur was born because Uther wanted another man's wife. These two kings were supposed to have a truce, but he couldn't control his lust. The stakes were that much higher, even though these are human vices. They had a position of power, they had a responsibility, and Arthur is not a perfect king either. He does make mistakes. He does use Excalibur, the sword, in moments of hatred 2 different times, and it does have negative effects on the people. He does bring prosperity, but he also brings pestilence. And it is human, but there's so much consequence to it. It's a very profound movie. And you even see how Morgana is formed. You see, essentially, you feel bad for her, even though she's on a quest for power. And you see the beginnings of that. It's fascinating. It truly is. There is. And now, when I talk about it feels like something that you could see on the stage. And you really need truly amazing actors to pull off, and you can get there's a lot to work with these characters, with this story, and they've been told and retold many, many times. It's not a realistic movie. It feels, there is an exaggeration to it. There is this style of acting that, if you're not used to this style of acting, it can be very jarring. Now, I could not stop laughing at the first third of it for a really silly reason. Now, I'm in love with a BBC show called Merlin. It is the gay fan fiction of Arthurian legend. It is, I've talked about it in a much, much older video, the bromance video. Because it's essentially about Merlin and Arthur are young the same age, attractive, and totally in love. The plot is homosexuality, I mean magic, is legal in Camelot, and Merlin must hide the fact that he's gay, I mean a sorcerer, to help his boyfriend, I mean Prince Arthur, become the great king of Camelot. Now, the first third of Excalibur is similar to how a lot of the acting in Merlin is. It's BBC's Merlin's very much a guilty pleasure for me, and because I'm so familiar with it, I did see that show in the entirety a couple times. The delivery is very, very similar to the first third of Excalibur, and I could not stop laughing. It was very, very funny. Now, the way Uther yells, "Merlin!" is very similar to how it's done in the show.
Merlin? Uther. Merlin! Merlin!
He also has a line, "Talk is for lovers, Merlin."
Talk is for lovers, Merlin!
Which happens on more than one occasion in the BBC show.
I think we'd probably get on.
Won't draw too many comparisons because they are very, very different. If you're an Arthurian legend purist, I would not recommend Merlin. But if you're interested in something really, really campy, and I feel like if you're into gay fan fiction, that is the show for you. Guilty pleasure, utterly fun. Excalibur is a profound experience, but it feels like even more serious pieces of media, like Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings, there is a similarity there too. Excalibur clearly has an influence. It clearly sticks around, and it's clearly very much worth remembering. I got a lot out of it. It's one of those movies you really have to rewatch. You would benefit from a rewatch. It's one of those movies where you can get something new out of it every single time you see it. It's one of those movies where you can just study it from a biblical standpoint, or you can study it from a historical standpoint, or you can study it from a stage standpoint, a Shakespearean standpoint, because you get a lot about humanity from this movie, the good, and the bad. And Merlin, who is a very interesting character in Excalibur, he even has a line, I believe it's him, that good and evil really cannot exist without the other. And you see both sides of that, which is really, really cool. It's a very multifaceted film. And you get this understanding that humanity really has not changed much. You can take something from every line in this film. And even with the character of Merlin, he's so interesting because you know nothing about him. He could be played in multiple different ways. Is he a man with power? Is he a god? Is he something in between? Is he a connection between worlds? Is he an angel? Is he a prophet? And you could get a lot out of that. I think that's really cool. You could learn about people, you can see wisdom in this character. I feel like talking about everything about this movie and what you can get out of it would require hours and lots of thesis papers. So it's cool to see. It is one I really think should be shown more in film schools, and should be shown more because it's an important film.